The lilies in Isabel's bouquet trembled as much as her hands did. The soft murmur of guests grew louder, like a low tide pulling back before a storm. She stood beneath the arched floral canopy at the front of the chapel, wrapped in white, lace and disbelief, her heart pounding like a drum with no rhythm. The violinist had long stopped playing. The officiant had cleared his throat for times, and still, Caleb hadn't come. He was supposed to be here by now, 10 minutes late, then 20, now almost 40. The room, which had once felt so magical, with its warm candles and golden afternoon light, had turned cold, hollow. Every breath she took felt like it would shatter her ribcage. Her best friend Maya stood nearby, whispering urgently, "Belle, come down. Let's go somewhere private, please." Isabel didn't move. She couldn't. Her heels felt glued to the marble floor. She kept her eyes fixed on the double doors at the back of the chapel as if Caleb might burst through any second, laughing, breathless, apologetic. Maybe a flat tire, maybe a misunderstanding, but her soul already knew the truth. He wasn't coming. The whispers grew louder. Someone in the back muttered, "Unbelievable." A woman gasped when Isabel swayed slightly. Catching herself on the edge of the podium, the officiant stepped forward again, offering a quiet word. "We can take a short recess." There's no pressure, but there was pressure, so much of it, in her chest, in her throat, in her eyes, where tears threatened to spill and undo her completely. Isabel had spent months planning this day, the flowers, the vows, the music, the dress that now clung to her like a cruel joke. She had believed Caleb when he promised forever. She had believed him last night when he kissed her forehead and said, "See you at the altar." She stared at the doors one last time and whispered, "He's not coming, is he?" Then the air shifted. The doors at the back of the chapel burst open with a thunderous crash that silenced the murmurs and sucked the breath from the room. Everyone turned. A tall man stepped through, framed by the sunlight spilling in from behind. His stride was slow, deliberate, each footfall echoing through the silent space. He wore a charcoal gray tailored suit that hugged his powerful frame, and his dark hair was swept back with effortless precision. But it was his eyes, intense, storm gray, and locked directly on Isabel, that silenced her heartbeat. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't glance at the shocked officiant. He walked toward her like he had been summoned. Isabel took a step back, confused. Who was he? He stopped a few feet from her. The whole chapel was holding its breath. Then, calmly, deeply, his voice cut through the silence. "I will marry you," he said. "Right now." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Isabel blinked. Her heart stuttered. "What?" He took one more step forward. "You deserve better than a man who leaves you crying at the altar." His voice was quiet, but firm. "If you'll have me, let me take his place." The room tilted. Isabel's bouquet slipped from her hand, scattering lilies across the marble, and still. His eyes never left hers. The silence after his words was louder than any gasp. It spread through the chapel like a shockwave, freezing every guest in place. For a few long seconds, Isabel could only stare at the stranger standing before her. Her ears rang, her lips parted, but nothing came out. She had forgotten how to speak. Everything about him was controlled, his voice, his posture, his presence. He stood tall, not with arrogance, but with a kind of unshakable certainty. He looked like he belonged at the front of a chapel, standing beside a bride, but not her, not today. Not like this, from the front row. Caleb's mother stood abruptly. "What is this madness?" she snapped, her voice slicing through the tension. "Who are you?" The man didn't flinch. He turned to her with a slow grace, and though his voice remained level, his words were like ice. "I'm the man who showed up." Gasps again. Someone dropped a glass in the back. Isabel's vision blurred, her breath coming in quick, shallow pulls. Her friend Maya moved to steady her, whispering, "Don't listen to him. He's clearly insane. Let's get you out of here." But Isabel didn't move, because something, deep inside her, past the humiliation, past the heartbreak, stirred. Not because of the man's words, not even because of his audacity, but because of his eyes. There was pain in them, not pity, not opportunism, pain. He looked at her the way no one had ever looked at her in her entire life. Not even Caleb, not even close, The officiant stepped forward nervously. "Sir, this is highly unorthodox. We cannot. I'll sign whatever you need." The man interrupted. "Make it legal. Public. Private. Doesn't matter." He turned back to Isabel, voice softening. "Or we can walk out that door and you'll never see me again. But if you do, you'll be walking away from someone who will never let you stand at an altar alone." The words unraveled something in her. The crowd behind her blurred into 1,000 indistinct shapes. Only he remained in focus, calm, still, waiting. Isabel's fingers found her bare ring finger, the one Caleb should have claimed. Instead, it now felt like a cold accusation. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was hollow. "Why would you do this?" The man didn't blink. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind." His answer knocked the wind from her lungs. Maya whispered urgently, "Belle, think. You don't even know his name." "I do," she whispered. The words shocked even her. Somewhere in her memory, buried deep in years and forgotten places, something had been sparked. The way he tilted his head, the way his voice curled around her name when he said it. She didn't know how, but she did know him, not from newspapers or magazines, though his tailored presence screamed wealth and power. She knew him. The officiant stepped forward, hesitant. "Miss Hart." Isabel looked back at the aisle she had just walked down alone, at the empty space where Caleb should have stood. Then she looked forward, at the stranger who wasn't a stranger, at the man who had walked in when everyone else turned away. She lifted her chin. "Then marry me." A collective gasp echoed. The man nodded once, solemnly, like a vow had already been made. Then he turned to the officiant. "Let's begin." Maya's mouth dropped open. "Isabel, are you serious?" Tears slipped from Isabel's eyes, not of heartbreak now, but of something else. Something she didn't dare name yet. The ceremony began again. The officiant's voice quivered as he read the vows, clearly unsure if this was real. The guests sat in stunned silence. Caleb's mother stormed out, and Isabel, hands trembling, took the stranger's hand in hers. His palm was warm. His grip was steady. As the officiant spoke, her heart beat wildly in her chest. Her mind screamed at her to stop, but her soul was quiet. When the words "you may kiss the bride" came, she froze. Then he stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, but instead of kissing her lips, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, the softest vow ever made. The chapel, once so cold, felt like it was full of light, and Isabel Hart, who minutes ago stood in ruins, became someone entirely new, a bride, a wife, a woman reborn in the arms of the most unexpected man. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that this man had been waiting for this moment for years. And now that she had said yes, he wasn't letting go, not ever. The ride away from the chapel was silent, not the awkward kind, not yet. It was the kind of silence too thick with shock and adrenaline to be pierced. Isabel sat in the back of the sleek black car, her wedding dress pooled around her like a vanishing dream. Her fingers still curled around the bouquet of wilted lilies. The man beside her, the man she had just married, sat with one arm draped casually across the back seat, staring out the opposite window. Neither spoke, because neither of them quite knew what had just happened. Then the car turned off the main road and entered a private drive, disappearing through a pair of iron gates that closed behind them with a hiss and a low thud that felt too permanent. Isabel blinked at the massive structure coming into view. Not a house, but a mansion. Glass and stone, and elegance built on a hill overlooking the city. The driver parked beneath an overhang. Rain had begun to fall in thin lines, slicing through the light like falling threads. He opened the door and turned to her. "You're safe now," he said, voice soft, steady. Isabel nodded without looking at him. He stepped out first, came around, and offered her his hand again, just like at the altar. Just like a man who had stepped into the wreckage and stood still while everyone else backed away. Her hand hovered, and then she took it, warm, firm, real. She rose from the car, her heels clicking against stone. The rain touched her bare shoulders. She didn't flinch. Inside, the house was cathedral silent. High ceilings, muted lighting, dark wood and soft marble, no portraits, no clutter, just space. Controlled, expensive, strangely intimate. He turned to her at last and said the first thing that broke the silence since I do. I'm Daniel. She blinked. Daniel Rains. The name struck something. She froze. You're that Daniel Rains? Her voice was soft, disbelieving. The developer, the guy who, she paused, searching for the words. You built the RAISE project in the Lower East Side. His brow lifted. Just a little, you know about that. I teach at Midtown Elementary, she replied, her voice steadier now. Raise funds helped us keep our after-school art program. You're the one who painted the wings of Harlem mural, he said. Almost without thinking, she stared. How do you know that? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he walked further into the foyer and finally loosened his tie. I'll have your things sent from the church. You can stay in the East Wing, separate quarters. Of course, Isabel crossed her arms. So this, what exactly is this? A publicity stunt? His face darkened. No, she stepped closer. Then why? Why me? Daniel turned and studied her. Really studied her, and something passed behind his eyes that made her breath catch. I couldn't watch you be abandoned. Like that, he said quietly. Not again, again, she echoed, heart thudding. What do you mean again? We've never met. Yes, he said, taking another step closer. We have. It hit her like a wave, a flicker of a face, a memory of a skinny boy with dark eyes and oversized shirts who sat in the back of her middle school art class. Always quiet, always drawing, always alone. No one remembered him. But she had. Oh my God, she breathed. He nodded once. I was Daniel Myers back. Then, foster home, name change came later. She staggered slightly and leaned against the wall. But how did you find me? I never had to, he said. I never stopped watching. There was no menace in the words. Only longing, sadness, years of silent reverence built into every syllable. You mean to tell me you've been, what? Following me? No, he said sharply. Supporting you. He opened a drawer from a nearby cabinet and pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Inside were copies of donation receipts, small art grants, anonymous scholarships, even the fundraiser that kept her classroom open during budget cuts. I watched from the sidelines because I thought you deserved better than someone like me, Daniel said, his voice low, almost breaking. But when I saw him leave you, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Isabel's throat tightened. So this marriage is real, he said, but not forced. I'll annul it tomorrow if you want. You're free. She looked down at her hands, still shaking. I don't know what I want. I know, he whispered. But I had to give you the choice. Because he didn't. Her chest swelled with confusion, anger, disbelief, and something else, something dangerous. Hope. He moved away, giving her space. Your room's upstairs, second door on the left. Rest, eat. Stay as long as you like, or leave tonight. She stood still. Why? Did you really do this? She asked again. He didn't turn around, but this time, his answer was quieter. Because you were the only person who ever saw me when I was invisible. I never forgot. And then he disappeared down the hall, leaving Isabel standing in the center of a mansion built on silence and secrets, her white dress soaked with rain, her heart cracking open in places she didn't know were still soft. She had been left at the altar, and somehow, found in the ruins. The first night in Daniel Rains's mansion felt like a dream she wasn't ready to claim as hers. Isabel lay in the oversized bed, surrounded by silk sheets that felt too expensive for someone like her. The room smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, lit only by the amber flicker of a modern fireplace outside. The rain hadn't stopped. It lashed against the windows like it was trying to remind her this wasn't real, that none of this, the impromptu marriage, the mansion, the millionaire who had once been the invisible foster kid, could possibly be real. But the black diamond ring on her finger said otherwise. She turned it slowly in the dim light. It didn't feel like a wedding ring. It felt like a question. Sleep didn't come easily. Not with her mind replaying every moment, the gasps, the kiss on the forehead. The way Daniel had said you're safe now, like he meant it with every cell in his body. Who does that for someone they barely know? No, not barely. He had known her all these years, and she never noticed. By 2 a.m., she gave up trying to sleep. She slipped out of bed, grabbed a sweater, and padded barefoot through the dark hallway. The east wing was silent, too silent, as she passed room after room, each one more curated than the last. She wondered what kind of man lived in such pristine isolation. Then she heard it, a soft sound. Like glass hitting glass. She followed the sound through a narrower hallway, stopping at a partially open door. Inside was a dimly lit room that didn't match the rest of the house. Bookshelves towered to the ceiling. Old rugs covered dark hardwood. A grand piano stood beneath an enormous window, its keys dusty. The fireplace here was real, not electric, and its embers glowed orange. And Daniel was there, not in a suit, but barefoot in a gray t-shirt and black pants, sitting on the floor with a half-empty tumbler of something in his hand. In front of him were two paintings. One was a childlike drawing of a girl with wild curls, holding a paintbrush in one hand and a heart in the other. The other was a hyper-realistic charcoal sketch of her. Isabel. Her breath caught in her throat. He looked up, slowly, like he already knew she was there. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said softly. "You didn't." She whispered. "I couldn't sleep." Daniel set the glass down and stood, brushing his hands on his pants. "This room is where I remember who I used to be, before the noise, before the company, before I learned to build walls people mistake for confidence." She took a cautious step forward. "That drawing, you made that when we were kids," he nodded. "6th grade. The day you stood up for me in the hallway when 3 boys shoved me into a locker." Her heart dropped. "I barely remember that," she whispered. "I remember everything," he said. "You called them cowards. You told them they'd never break someone who could draw whole worlds with a pencil. You said I was the best artist in the whole school." Her eyes stung. "I meant it," she said. He smiled faintly. "You were the first person who ever made me believe I was more than a mistake." A beat of silence passed between them. "Daniel," she began, unsure how to say what was building inside her. All of this, it's overwhelming, I know." He replied. "I threw you into something huge, and I won't pretend I didn't do it selfishly." She tilted her head. "Then why offer to annul it?" He met her gaze. "Because I loved you enough to give you the choice." There it was, no hesitation. No hesitation this time. Loved. The word should have made her run. But instead, Isabel stepped closer, slowly, until she stood just in front of him. "You say you watch me," she whispered, "from the sidelines, that you wanted to protect me. But why now, Daniel? Why wait until the most humiliating moment of my life?" His jaw tightened. "Because I was tired of watching people treat you like you were disposable. I knew Caleb wasn't worthy of you. I knew it. But I told myself it wasn't my place. That maybe you loved him, and that was enough. You knew him." Daniel hesitated. "We crossed paths in business. Once. His father tried to push a merger through the back door by using you as leverage. I warned him." Her stomach turned. "Warned him how?" "I told him if he left you," Daniel said darkly, "I'd make sure everyone knew what kind of man he really was." She staggered back slightly. "So you threatened him?" "I gave him a choice," Daniel replied. "He made the wrong one." The room spun. "You knew he might leave me, and you let it happen?" "I didn't let it happen. I waited." Daniel snapped, emotion breaking through. "Waited to see if he had the spine to choose love over greed. And when he didn't, I did." She turned away, breath catching. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, quieter now. "I know I should have told you everything from the start, but I've spent my entire life staying in the background, being the ghost in the room, and the moment I finally stepped forward, it was too late to explain. You were standing at an altar, alone." She faced him again, trembling. "You're still doing it, Daniel. Controlling the world around me without asking if I want to be saved." His eyes held hers. "Then tell me to stop," he said, voice raw. "Tell me to walk away, and I will. I swear it." Isabel's lips parted. She tried to say the words, but nothing came, because no one had ever said they would fight for her. Not like this. The rain hammered the window. He stepped forward. "I know I'm not the man you dreamed of, but I'll never lie to you. I'll never leave you standing alone. I need time," she said, barely above a whisper. He nodded, backing away. "You'll have it." And then he left her alone in the room filled with sketches and silence. But as she looked at the drawings again, especially the one of her holding a heart in one hand and a paintbrush in the other, Isabel realized she wasn't sure which part terrified her more, that Daniel Rains had loved her in secret for years, or that a part of her had already started loving him back. The next morning, Isabel woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, warm against her face and softening the weight in her chest. But as the light settled on the black diamond ring still clinging to her finger, everything came rushing back. She had been left at the altar. She had married a man she didn't truly know. And last night, she had learned he knew everything about her. Daniel Rains, the boy she once defended, the man who had watched over her silently for years, and now her husband. But what Isabel didn't know, what Daniel hadn't told her, was that forces were already moving beyond the walls of his mansion. Choices made in shadows, conversations whispered behind closed boardroom doors, because someone else had watched the wedding unfold too, and that someone had everything to lose if Daniel Rains remained in the spotlight. When Isabel stepped into the kitchen that morning, she found a breakfast spread already waiting: fruit, fresh bread, coffee, folded napkins. Daniel stood by the window, phone in hand, dressed sharply in a navy suit, his back to her. "You didn't have to," she began. He turned. "I wanted to." His face was unreadable, guarded again, like the boy behind the billionaire was. "Hidden for now. I can make my own breakfast," she said quietly, reaching for a cup. "I know," he said, "but this house is always cold without company. I thought maybe you'd want something warm." She paused. The way he said it wasn't about food. It was about her. As she poured coffee, he leaned against the counter. "There's something you should know," he said. Isabel tensed. "I didn't want to tell you yesterday. Not until you'd rested." She turned. "What is it?" Caleb's disappearance wasn't a coincidence. Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I had a private investigator following him. Not to spy, to protect. I wanted to make sure he was who he said he was, and..." Daniel's jaw tightened. The night before the wedding, he received a wire transfer, large sum, from an offshore account linked to Kronvale Holdings. Her heart stopped. "Kronvale," she echoed. "The firm trying to buy out the Rays project." He nodded grimly. "They've been after my company for months. I refused them. And when they couldn't get to me, they went after someone close to you." Isabel dropped her coffee. It shattered across the marble floor. "No," she whispered. "You think they paid him to humiliate me?" "I think they paid him to make you look like the liability," Daniel said. "To destroy your reputation so they could say I was distracted, vulnerable, compromised." "And the marriage?" she asked shakily. "Did they plan for that?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "No. That part, that was me." She staggered back, trying to breathe. "They used me," she whispered. "They used my life like a pawn." "Yes," Daniel said, "and now they're going to regret it." There was something darker in his voice now, not rage, precision. "But how can we fight them?" she asked. "They're everywhere. They have power, influence." He cut her off. "So do I." Isabel looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she saw not just the man who loved her in secret, but the machine behind the man, the strategist, the visionary, the orphan who clawed his way up until no one could touch him, unless he let them. "What are you planning?" Daniel's voice was low. "A war." Her heart pounded. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, stepping closer, "we show them exactly who they underestimated." But the enemy had already made the first move. That same morning, a headline exploded across every digital platform: "Rains. Surprise bride a gold digger. Anonymous sources reveal secret agenda." Isabel's old yearbook photo was front and center, along with quotes, distorted, twisted, from people she'd barely spoken to in years. She scrolled, her hands trembling. She always said she'd marry rich someday. She used to talk about Daniel Rains in high school. This was clearly her plan. She was obsessed with money, lies, all of it. She dropped the tablet and stumbled backward. Daniel caught it midair before it could hit the ground. "I told you they'd come for you," he said. "But this is my character, Daniel. They're ruining my life." He looked her in the eye. "Then we ruin their plan." She stared at him, still shaking. "I'm not like you," she said. "I don't know how to play this game." He stepped forward. "Then I'll teach you." His eyes burned with something deeper than protection now, belief. "You were born to be underestimated," he said, "and they made a mistake giving you the spotlight. Because once the world hears your voice, once they see you, they'll realize you were never the weak one." She stood still, tears threatening. "I don't want to be famous," she whispered. "You don't have to be," he replied. "You just have to speak your truth, and I'll make sure they listen." That night, Daniel arranged for her to meet his crisis PR team, not to manipulate the narrative, but to own it. Isabel was hesitant. Her hands shook when she spoke. But when they asked her to tell her story, her real story, something changed. She told them about the art program, the mural, the kids she taught, the reason she never gave up even when she was broke and tired and alone. And when she finished, the room was quiet. And then one woman whispered, "Let her speak." Just like that. No spin, no edits. That's the story. And for the first time since her world fell apart, Isabel felt something anchor her again. Not Daniel, not revenge. Purpose. She had been left at the altar. She had been mocked. But now they had made one fatal mistake. They had given her a platform, and she was going to use it, not just to defend herself, but to destroy the narrative built to silence women like her. And Daniel Rains, he would burn the empire down beside her, brick by brick, if they tried to stop her. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 10 a.m., reporters were already circling like vultures outside the iron gates of Daniel Rains's estate. Isabel watched them from the second-floor balcony, dressed in a soft cream blouse and charcoal trousers. No wedding dress, no glitz, no diamonds. Just her, real, unpolished, terrified. "I don't want to be the girl who got left at the altar," she said aloud. Daniel, standing behind her, answered gently. "Then don't be." She turned. His face was calm, controlled, but his hands, she noticed, were clenched. Even Daniel Rains, master of quiet power, was bracing for war. "I feel like I'm walking into a trap," she whispered. "You're walking into their trap," he said, stepping beside her and flipping the table. Isabel laughed, but it cracked in her throat. "Easy for you to say. You built empires. I teach 6-year-olds how to use glitter glue." He looked her dead in the eyes. "You taught me what it means to be seen. Do you know how rare that is? If you could do that for a broken boy hiding in the back of a classroom, you can face a few cameras." She swallowed. "And what happens after I speak?" Daniel's voice lowered. "We strike." At exactly 12:02 p.m., the double doors opened, and Isabel stepped onto the podium alone. No makeup artist, no handlers, just a single microphone and rows of press. Cameras clicked, lights flared. The whispers started instantly. "That's her. She doesn't look like a gold digger. What is she even doing?" She stood still for 3 seconds, long enough to silence the murmurs, long enough for the world to see. Her, not the runaway bride, not the mystery millionaire's wife, Isabel Green. And then she spoke. "My name is Isabel Green. I am a public school art teacher. And yes, I was left at the altar." A pause, the air crackled. "But that's not why I'm here today." She told them everything. Not the scandal, the truth. She spoke about her students, about the mural that kept getting painted over by vandals until one anonymous donor funded a full-time art security grant. She spoke about the hours she spent working 2 jobs to keep the classroom lights on. And then she spoke about being watched, not in a sinister way, in the way a soul sometimes recognizes another soul from miles away and chooses to believe in them quietly, patiently, until one day fate cracks open and a man walks into a chapel and offers to be the net beneath your falling heart. She didn't cry. She didn't stumble. She told the world who she was before they told her who to be. And when she stepped down, a hush followed her. It lasted only moments before phones began buzzing. Because while she was speaking, Daniel Rains was executing his strike across the city. In the high-rise boardroom of Cronvale Holdings, CEO Miles Cartwright was pacing, red-faced, furious. How the hell did she flip the narrative? His assistant, pale and visibly sweating, handed him a folder. "You need to see this." "Sir." Inside were documents, confidential ones, and leaked emails from Caleb's account. Proof that Caleb had been promised $500,000 to humiliate Isabel publicly in exchange for sabotaging Daniel's reputation. Emails detailing how Kronvale intended to push a psychological profile that labeled Daniel Rains as unstable due to sudden emotional marriage decisions, all to force a buyout under duress. Miles flipped through them with trembling fingers. How? Who leaked this? The assistant swallowed. Rains. His team hacked the offshore accounts, cross-referenced every fake charity Kronvale used for laundering. And what? The assistant hesitated. And the FBI has been alerted. Miles staggered back into his chair. On his screen, every news outlet was now showing Isabel's speech. Headlines were changing. Teacher's Grace turns scandal into story of the year. The bride who fought back. Daniel Rains' secret wife speaks and stuns the nation. But worse, far worse, was what came next. Because at 12:43 p.m., Daniel Rains stepped onto his own live stream. No press, no podium, just one camera, one chair, and a flash drive in his hand. I tried to play by their rules, he said calmly, but the game was always rigged. So, today, I'm showing the world the truth. He uploaded the entire Kronvale conspiracy to a public domain, with every illegal transaction, every bribe, every face. Kronvale's stock plummeted by 60% in under 4 hours. Miles Cartwright was issued a federal subpoena that same night. And as the empire began to crumble, Isabel sat in her quiet room, staring at the bouquet from that ruined wedding day, now dry, preserved, and strangely beautiful. Daniel knocked once and entered. "You did it," he said softly. "No," she replied, tears glistening. "We did." But even in that quiet moment of victory, one question remained unspoken. What happens when the war is over, when vengeance has been served? What does a marriage built on rescue become? She turned to him. "Daniel," she whispered, "what if we don't know who we are without the fire?" He didn't hesitate. "Then we build something new," he said, crossing the room, together, not from ashes, but from choice. And for the first time, neither of them was running, not from pain, not from love. And not from the unknown. That evening, the world was still catching its breath. Social media was ablaze. News anchors tripped over their words. Hashtags like #TheBrideWhoFoughtBack and #Rains v Kronvale trended in 26 countries. But within the fortress-like walls of Daniel Rains' estate, silence reigned. Isabel sat in the library, hands folded in her lap, the fire crackling beside her. But this time, the room didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like the calm before something darker. Daniel entered quietly, a stack of folders in his hands. His face was unreadable. "What is it now?" she asked, half expecting more headlines. He placed the folders on the table and opened one. Inside were photographs, not grainy tabloid shots, but sharp, clinical surveillance images. Isabel leaned forward and froze. One photo was of her, taken 3 weeks ago, at a grocery store near her school. Another, her classroom, through a cracked door. Another, a letter she'd written to a student's parent, now watermarked by a red stamp, copied. She stared at the images, heart thundering. Where did you get these?" "They were emailed to me this morning," Daniel said grimly. "No message, no signature, just a warning. From who? We don't know yet. But Kronvale isn't the only one who's had their eyes on you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you saying?" Daniel sat across from her. "There's a third player, someone who stood in the shadows during all this, watching, waiting, letting Kronvale fall, letting me exhaust my resources. And now, they're making their move." "But who would?" Daniel slid another photo across the table. A woman, early 50s, pin-sharp cheekbones, red lips, eyes like winter steel. She goes by Evelyn Merrow. Former intelligence, turned corporate mercenary, a fixer for hire. Specializes in dismantling reputations, blackmail, and asset manipulation. "Asset?" Isabel asked, confused. "You," Daniel said quietly. Her breath caught. "She believes you're the reason I didn't sell the company, that you're the leverage. And now that the world sees you as a public figure with moral standing, she wants to bend that image, corrupt it, or destroy it." Isabel stood, backing away from the table. Why? Why go after me? Kronvale's gone. You won. We exposed the truth. Daniel's gaze didn't waver, because when truth becomes power, someone always wants to weaponize it. That night, the estate's security tripled, every camera upgraded, every perimeter checked. Daniel never left Isabel's side, but neither of them slept. And at 3:17 a.m., a drone breached the east perimeter wall, silent, small, fast. It hovered just outside Isabel's window, a tiny lens blinking red dot by the time security scrambled. The drone had vanished. In its place, a USB drive glued to the outer glass. The message, carved into it, was simple. She marries a ghost. She lives like one. By morning, the video was already online, footage doctored and color graded, showing Isabel in a room with Caleb, laughing, holding hands. The timestamp falsely labeled it 3 days before the wedding. The implication that she was complicit in the betrayal, that maybe she never loved Daniel, that maybe she was in on it all along. The comments flooded in. She's a liar. So she was a gold digger. Rains fell for a con artist in a pretty dress. And then the death threats started. Daniel acted fast. The video was taken down in under 2 hours. But the damage was done. Isabel stayed in bed all day, the weight of the world pressing against her ribs. Her body felt foreign. Her mind spun like a storm that wouldn't stop. But as the sun dipped behind the skyline, she made a decision. She walked into Daniel's office without knocking, her eyes hard. "I'm not going to hide," she said. He looked up, startled. "You need rest. I need to fight." He studied her. "How we find her," Isabel said. "This Evelyn. We find her, we expose her, and we end this, not for revenge for me. For every woman who's ever been turned into a rumor because she didn't stay silent." Daniel stood slowly. "That's dangerous, Isabel." "I'm already in danger," she replied. "I'd rather stand than be hunted." A long pause. Then Daniel walked to the safe behind a painting and keyed in a code. He pulled out a thin silver laptop and handed it to her. "What's this?" He met her eyes. "Every file I've gathered on Evelyn Merrow, from my private archives. Classified deals, covert ops, things no court will ever touch." She took it, her fingers trembling. "Are you sure?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "I told you I'd never lie, never leave you alone. And if we're going after Evelyn, we go together." But just as they were about to leave the office, Daniel's phone rang. A single unknown number. He answered on speaker. A woman's voice crackled through. Calm, measured. Double quotes. "Hello, Isabel," she said. Isabel froze. "I wanted to say congratulations. You're finally interesting enough to kill." Then the line went dead, and silence fell over the room like snow. Except this time, it wasn't fear that filled Isabel's chest. It was fire. Because someone just made the biggest mistake of their life. They threatened the wrong bride. The sun rose blood orange over the city skyline, but inside the Rains estate, dawn felt like dust. Isabel didn't sleep. Not after that voice, "You're finally interesting enough to kill." It echoed in her bones long after the call ended, like a ghost with teeth. She sat in Daniel's war room, a converted underground vault lined with screens, maps, and data boards. Once meant to monitor company threats, it now tracked something darker. One screen zoomed in on Evelyn Merrow's last known location, a remote island estate, registered under 12 shell corporations. Another showed press sentiment charts. Her name, Isabel Green, was still trending, but the narrative had splintered. Some believed her, others twisted the story into something poisonous. And then there was the red folder at the center of the table, the one marked Project Widow. Daniel leaned over her shoulder. "That's what Evelyn's calling this, Project Widow." Isabel whispered. "She wants to kill you." "No," Daniel replied. "She wants to erase us. Not just physically, publicly, to make it so. Even if we survive, no one listens again." He opened the folder. Inside, a forged pregnancy test, a fake diary entry with Isabel's name on it, doctored screenshots of her allegedly shopping luxury brands while children in her school lacked supplies, and a fake email exchange, suggesting she offered to sell her story to tabloids after the Alter scandal. "None of this is real," she breathed. "No, but she only needs one person to believe it, he said, and one wrong headline can burn everything down. He slid another photo across the table. It was of Isabel's mother. Taken 2 hours ago, sipping tea on her porch. Isabel's heart froze. She's watching my family. Daniel nodded. And my employees, my old foster brother, anyone who ever mattered. Isabel closed the file slowly. We have to stop playing defense. Daniel's gaze sharpened. Then let's turn the game inside out. At 3 p.m., Daniel and Isabel walked into the underground entrance of a data farm in Nevada. One Daniel had secretly funded for clean AI research. Now it would serve a new purpose. They handed Evelyn's files to their AI lead, a mute genius named Ravi, who began running facial pattern reconstructions and financial links across global networks. But Isabel had her own plan. She wasn't a hacker. She wasn't trained in espionage. She was a teacher, and teachers know how to make truth unforgettable. She reached out to her students, quietly, carefully, with parental permission. She gathered them into a safe building and handed each one a paintbrush. They created a massive mural over 100 feet long, live-streamed in silence. A child holding a bouquet of broken lilies, a tall man catching her fall, shadows chasing behind them, and then light, shaped not as fire, but as a voice. The mural was titled, "Tell the Whole Story." Within 6 hours, it had over 80 million views, and that's when Evelyn made her second mistake. She went after the children. The school received an anonymous email with a photo attachment, Isabel hugging one of her students, captioned crudely to imply inappropriate conduct. The principal, scared of public scandal, called Isabel in. "We need to talk," he said grimly. But what Evelyn hadn't anticipated was the students. The children released their own video, standing in front of the mural, holding signs that read, "She saved us, she taught us to speak, she's our safe place." And one little girl, with pigtails and paint on her cheeks, looked directly into the camera and said, "Why are adults trying to hurt my teacher? She never hurt anyone." It went viral within hours. The attack collapsed under the weight of innocence. And now the world turned. Isabel wasn't just the girl left at the altar. She wasn't just the wife of a millionaire. She had become something Evelyn couldn't control, a movement. But Evelyn didn't flee. She retaliated. At 1:30 a.m., Daniel's private server was breached, not just hacked, poisoned. Dozens of confidential communications between him and global security firms were released online. The media twisted them. Headlines screamed, "Reigns tied to mercenaries, shadow billionaire spies on political figures." His board panicked, stocks dipped, allies pulled out. "Daniel," Isabel said, voice shaking. "What is this?" He was silent. "Is it true?" "I've never hurt anyone," he said. "But yes, I had to monitor certain players. The tech world isn't clean. I did what I had to do to protect what we built." "And me?" she asked. "Were you watching me too?" His eyes dropped. "For years," he whispered. Tears burned her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wasn't supposed to fall in love," he said. "You were supposed to be safe, not my wife." She turned away. The hurt was sharp, betrayal mixed with protection, twisted like a knife. "I'm sorry," he said, voice hoarse. "I should have told you. But if I hadn't watched, you wouldn't be alive right now." He stepped closer. "I didn't just choose to save you at that altar. I chose this, you, the danger, the war. I'd choose it again." She wiped her tears. "Then let's finish it." They had no choice now. Evelyn Merrow was done playing subtle. She wanted destruction. But Isabel had something Evelyn didn't believe in. Faith. Not in Daniel. Not in the system. Not even in herself. Faith in truth. In children who paint murals. In the world still being capable of waking up. And so, that night, as Evelyn prepared her final attack, one that would leak Isabel's private medical records and stage an international fraud claim, Isabel pressed send on a video she had filmed in one take. No makeup, no edits, no script. She looked into the camera and said, "I was left at the altar. I was mocked, lied about, hunted. But the greatest mistake they made was thinking I'd stay quiet. My name is Isabel Green, and this is my story, not theirs." That video, It shattered the internet. And in the final frame, as her eyes held steady on screen, a subtitle faded in. And next, I speak in person. Live. Global. Undeniable. And this time, Evelyn would have nowhere to hide. The auditorium was packed to the seams. A global non-profit had invited Isabel to speak after her video made international headlines. Cameras from every major network were mounted. Security was tight. The world was ready, but Isabel wasn't preparing a speech. She was preparing for war. Daniel stood beside her backstage, adjusting the mic on her collar, eyes dark with calculation. He looked stunning in a sleek black suit, but his hands trembled. When he reached for hers, "I should be the one doing this," he said. "No," she replied gently. "They're not coming after you anymore. They want me, and I'm done hiding behind headlines." He nodded slowly. "If anything happens," she cut him off, "don't say goodbye, just watch me." When her name was called, she stepped out, to a standing ovation, not for being a victim, not for being a wife, but for surviving and speaking. The stage lights nearly blinded her, but she could still see the faces: hope, doubt, curiosity. She took a deep breath. "I was left at the altar. That's where my story began for the world. But it didn't start there, and it didn't end there either." Her voice didn't shake. She spoke of the pain, the betrayal, the whispering silence of shame. She spoke of Daniel, of how he stood still when the world turned away. She spoke of Evelyn Merrow. And then she paused, letting the quiet stretch. "I have something to show you," she said. The screen behind her lit up with an encrypted video feed. Live footage of Evelyn's island compound. The crowd murmured in confusion. And then Isabel's voice rang out like a bell. "Evelyn, you're watching, I know. So here's what's going to happen." The camera zoomed in on Evelyn's face. Shocked, furious, unaware she was being live-streamed to the entire world. "You tried to erase me. But I'm not just a headline. I'm a person, and I brought backup." Suddenly, a second feed appeared. It was Ravi, Daniel's AI expert, seated at a remote control station. He began to release files, one by one. Not rumors. Proof. Blackmail transactions, bribes, coercion of government officials, a confidential list of journalists Evelyn paid off to spread lies about Isabel. The crowd gasped. The chat window on the global livestream exploded. "She's done. Who is this woman? She's taking down an empire with a flash drive." But then everything went dark. The screens cut, the microphones hissed, and the lights flickered. Then, boom! A loud pop echoed through the auditorium. Not an explosion, but a power surge. Panic rippled. Security jumped into formation. Daniel rushed toward the stage as Isabel stood frozen. In the darkness, a single spotlight snapped back on. Evelyn Merrow was standing on stage. In the flesh. Gasps erupted. No one had seen her arrive. She moved like a ghost, calm, dressed in a slate-gray dress with gloves. She walked slowly toward Isabel. Eyes burning. "I warned you," she said softly, so only the front rows could hear. "You should have stayed." A footnote. The audience held their breath. "I'm not a footnote," Isabel replied, her voice steady. "I'm the chapter you can't erase." Evelyn smirked. "Then I guess we'll end this story now." From beneath her coat, Evelyn reached for something metallic. But before she could lift it, Daniel appeared behind her like a shadow. He twisted her wrist, and the weapon clattered to the stage floor. A syringe. Security tackled her instantly. The audience screamed. Sirens blared. Evelyn fought with the rage of a cornered lioness. But it was too late. Daniel knelt beside Isabel. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, breathless. "But I'm done being afraid." By midnight, Evelyn Merrow was in federal custody. The charges piled high: extortion, cyberterrorism, attempted assault, conspiracy. The moment trended for 19 straight hours. But the next morning, the final twist came. Daniel received a letter, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside, a single photo. It showed a much younger Evelyn, holding hands with a teenage boy, Daniel. On the back of the photo, "You were always the son I never had, until you became the man I couldn't control." Daniel stared at it, stunned. "Is this real?" Isabel asked, reading his face. He nodded. "She was a handler at the orphanage I was placed in. I didn't remember. She used to whisper that I'd do big things, that the world would either fear me or break me. He sat down heavily. She built me. Then she tried to bury me. Isabel placed her hand over his. Double quotes. No, she didn't build you. You did. You're not her project, Daniel. You're your own man. His eyes glistened. And what about you? What are you now? She smiled. I'm the woman who said yes, at the altar, in the fire, in the aftermath. And if you ask me again, I'll say it every time. A long silence passed. Then Daniel stood, walked to his drawer, and pulled out the original ring, the one she never got to wear on her real wedding day. He knelt on one knee, not to fix what was broken, but to begin what was real. Will you marry me? Not to save each other, but because we choose each other. Tears welled in Isabel's eyes. Yes, she whispered, finally free. And outside, as the world spun faster, two souls stood still, no longer victims or warriors, but partners, not born from a ruined altar, but from fire. The wedding was set for spring, not in a chapel, not in a cathedral, but in the very same garden where Isabel once sat crying alone, just days after being left at the altar. This time, there was no crowd of strangers, just those who mattered. Her students, her mother, Daniel's adopted family, Ravi, the security guards who'd fought alongside them. Even the news cameras stayed outside the estate walls, respecting the barrier between spectacle and sanctuary. Isabel stood barefoot, on soft grass, her dress simple but elegant, a handmade gown sewn by three mothers from her school district. The veil was crafted from old lace her mother had saved for years, waiting for this day even when Isabel herself had stopped believing it would come. Daniel stood in front of her in a crisp white suit, nervous but smiling. Have you ever, he whispered, been more afraid of being happy than anything else in the world? Yes, Isabel replied, but not today. The officiant smiled. The vows were brief, but spoken with trembling truth. And when Daniel kissed her, there were no tears this time, only stillness and sunlight. But fate wasn't finished with them yet. 3 weeks later, the trial began. Evelyn Merrill refused a plea deal. She came to court with her signature calm, wearing a pearl gray dress and no handcuffs. Her legal team had pulled strings to avoid the image of imprisonment, but the courtroom was not her playground anymore. Isabel sat behind the prosecution desk, not as a witness, but as co-counsel. Her teaching license temporarily surrendered. She'd chosen to assist the legal team as a civilian advisor, reviewing every psychological profile Evelyn had ever used to manipulate victims. And when she took the stand, the courtroom went silent. She didn't tell a dramatic story. She told the truth, what it felt like to be erased, what it cost to be believed. What courage meant when no one clapped. By the time she stepped down, Evelyn's silence had cracked, her knuckles white, her gaze burning, but she didn't speak. Not a word. Until the very end. The judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts. The courtroom exhaled, but as Evelyn was led away, she turned to Isabel and whispered just loud enough for the mic to pick it up. You still don't know what he did, do you? The words hit like acid. Isabel froze. Evelyn smiled, not with joy, but with certainty. And then she was gone. That night, Isabel sat in the study, heart racing. She had tried to forget those words, to pretend they were manipulation, a last dagger from a dying queen. But something gnawed at her. So she opened Daniel's encrypted vault. He had given her full access after the trial, full trust. But in the folder marked 1999, South Korea, Black Ridge, she found it. A file labeled Asset Transfer D. Rains, and inside, a photo. A young man, barely 19, handcuffed. Blood on his temple. A document signed in another language. Translated, you agree to all conditions of release in exchange for lifelong service. Below it, a seal from an international agency, and a handler's signature, E. Marrow, the room. Spun. Daniel had been a weapon, trained, deployed, owned. He hadn't built his empire from nothing. He had escaped it, but that meant, Isabel, his voice came from behind. She turned slowly. He saw the file in her hands, and for the first time, Daniel didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man stripped down to the bone. I didn't want you to see that, he said quietly. What was it? She asked. What was the price of your freedom? He sat down, shoulders heavy. It wasn't freedom. It was exile with privilege. I built what I could so I wouldn't be used anymore. And me, she asked, was I just the next asset? The one who saved your soul? No, he said. You were the one who made me human. That's what Evelyn couldn't stand. Silence settled like a storm cloud. Can you forgive me? He whispered. For what I was. Isabel stood still for a long moment. Then she crossed the room and knelt beside him. I don't need the man who saved me, she said. I need the man who stood beside me when I didn't want to be saved. He looked up, eyes wide. You didn't lie to me, she added. You were just still waking up. And with that, the shadow between them was gone. 1 year later, Isabel stood before a different crowd. This time, she wasn't wearing white. She wore red, a symbol of defiance, of survival. She was now director of the Rains Foundation for Women Erased by Power. And beside her stood Daniel, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. But in the crowd, unnoticed by cameras, sat a girl in a blue hoodie, barely 20, a burner phone in her hand. Watching. When Isabel stepped off the stage, the girl pressed send. A single message to an unknown number. She's stronger than expected. Do we still proceed? And a reply came seconds later. Yes, the game isn't over, only the board has changed. The camera zoomed out. New enemies, new secrets. But one thing was certain. Isabel was no longer the girl left crying at the altar. She was the woman the world would never silence again. And now she was ready for anything.